Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's installment of C-Suite Snacks. My name is Steve Ronan, the host of today's webinar and the leader of Citrin Cooperman's consulting and outsourcing practices. Every Thursday at noon, we bring you snack-sized insights and a timely topic delivered by experts in the field. One of the top questions we receive is, how can I use data to drive better decisions? And today, we're going to look at that from an HR perspective. We're joined by Diana DiCrescenzo from ADP to talk about how to use data to drive excellence in managing your talent, both from a cost standpoint and with how you hire, engage, and retain your people. ADP is one of the largest talent data sets in the world, and today Diana will give us a look at how to harness this for your decision making. A few administrative reminders before we start. We accept questions throughout the webinar, so please look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and locate the Q&A button. Please feel free to enter your questions there as we go. We are saving time at the end of today's presentation to address the questions we receive. Additionally, we'll be doing our traditional snack basket giveaway, where a lucky attendee will win a craft basket of snacks. The winner will be announced at the end of today's session. Finally, if you're here because you found the invite on our website or on social media, I encourage you to sign up for our mailing list to make sure you receive an invite for our new snack-sized topics each week. Please also visit our C-Suite Snacks Content Hub on our website to view the recordings and look through the decks of prior week's presentations. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Diana to begin today's session. Diana, thanks for being here. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time out of their busy days to join today's session. As Steve mentioned, my name is Diana DiCrescenzo, and for the past 7 years at ADP, I've worked with executives of mid and large-sized organizations to understand what their goals and needs are as it relates to HCM functions, and based on that understanding, to help recommend a tailored solution that will ultimately align best with what they're looking to achieve. Today, I'm going to be sharing specific examples of how world-class organizations are using data to make more informed and timely business decisions to drive down their labor costs and, as a result, increase profitability. And of course, in celebration of National Equal Pay Day, which was yesterday, we'll also be touching on the importance of identifying pay gaps within your workforce and the costs associated with closing those gaps. First, I'd like to start off with a case study and story of a client of ours called Casey's General Stores. Casey's General Store is the 4th largest convenience store and gas station chain in North America, comprised of over 2,000 stores and nearly 38,000 employees. They're headquartered in Iowa with locations spread all over the Midwest. However, they really do so much more than just being a convenience store chain. They do construction work, they provide childcare, they have employees in distribution centers, truck and food delivery drivers, and of course, administrative people in their corporate office. And each time they make an acquisition, they're also merging in new people, new cultures, and processes into their organization. Over the years, through their growth, they've realized they needed standard operating procedures and, more importantly, technology that would make it very easy for their employees and specifically their managers to have real-time access and visibility into their direct workforce data in order to make real-time decisions and gain greater control over their rising labor costs. One area in particular that they identified was a huge expense for their organization and potential area for improvement was their overtime spend. Before taking action and leveraging technology to get ahead of this problem, Casey's General Store had 42 manual processes associated with time collection and payroll, so it was incredibly hard to act on the data when it wasn't timely or easy to interpret. By the time leadership was able to organize the overtime data and get it into the hands of 2,200 managers overseeing their specific locations, the information was already outdated by several quarters. Fast forward to Q4 of 2017, Casey's General Stores implemented the use of real-time overtime dashboards and deployed it into the hands of all of their managers. Now these managers were able to start each day by quickly reviewing which employees were approaching overtime and adjusting schedules accordingly to reduce or even eliminate any unnecessary overtime. At a corporate level, the operations management team was able to identify specific stores with the highest overtime rates and prioritize taking action in those stores immediately. As an example, they adjusted staffing between local stores to reduce overtime hours at understaffed locations. By transitioning from stagnant, outdated manual spreadsheets to real-time, easy-to-digest dashboards, Casey's General Stores was able to deliver critical HR data straight to the hands of managers, resulting in greater control over labor costs, saving the managers 30 minutes per week in reviewing time data, and ultimately driving down their total overtime rate by 6% in just over 1 year, resulting in millions of dollars in annual savings. Beyond just the substantial reduction in labor spend, Casey's General Stores also saw a huge boost in employee engagement by scheduling employees more effectively and ensuring that no location was understaffed and overworked. Switching gears a bit, I'd like to share some data we collected during an ADP data webinar hosted in May of 2020, where we surveyed 800 attendees comprised of business executives just like yourselves. We first started by asking, how important are workforce analytics to the future of your organization? And nearly 90% of those surveyed responded that data is extremely important and the organizations they work for are absolutely going to be relying on access to that data to drive decision-making. Then we followed up with this question: what is your organization's maturity in using workforce analytics to drive action and decision-making? So in other words, we can all now agree that workforce data is extremely valuable, but how far along are we in terms of actually putting that data into action? And of those surveyed, 60% stated that their organization is not mature with data utilization, and we'll get into why that is momentarily. So of course, we can all always do a better job when it comes to consuming data, but I wanted everyone on this call to have a benchmark of where your peers feel in terms of doing so. Now, during that same webinar, the final question we asked of attendees was, what is your biggest challenge to driving value from workforce analytics in your organization? And the top 3 answers were knowing where to focus. So without easy access to data and understanding where the biggest cost drivers lie, it's hard to know what areas to prioritize first. The second challenge is trusting the data, which of course can be a concern, especially when manually pulling data from multiple sources. And the third was gaining buy-in from leadership, which I think can be directly correlated to the first 2 challenges, right? If I'm in your shoes, I'm probably wondering, does it really make sense to invest all this time and effort into organizing data if we don't even quite know where to focus first? And more importantly, how can we possibly base critical business decisions off data that we're still questioning the integrity of? But if we pause and take a look at this chart as a whole, you can see that the challenges are really all over the board. And there are a lot of different areas where many of us can use help to make data more actionable, more easy to understand, and ultimately more useful to drive the changes necessary to reducing labor costs. So with all those challenges in mind, how can we begin to implement data-driven approach to reducing labor costs and improving employee engagement all at the same time? And how are the 2 even correlated? It starts with having clean, reliable data, which is really the foundation for being able to, 1, identify the most critical areas of opportunity specific to your organization, 2, applying machine learning and AI techniques in order to quickly draw conclusions off of that data, 3, to deploy those capabilities throughout your organization into the hands of those who can have an immediate direct impact using it, and 4, to regularly measure your business results and ROI of implementing this approach. In the examples you see on the screen here, we'll be relying on aggregated anonymized data of nearly 800,000 ADP clients and 30 million people employed by those organizations to not only look at internal data, but also benchmark against local and vertical peer groups. So we'll be looking at these 3 use cases in particular. And as we go through each one, please take a moment to think about whether or not you feel confident in the ability to answer these questions with the data your team has available today. Are you compensating your employees competitively and equitably? How does your overtime spend compare with that of your competitors? And do you know which department is losing the most talent and why? And now we'll go through each of these use cases and share how real-time internal and external data paired with AI can help answer these questions and, more importantly, help to reduce any unnecessary labor costs associated with each one.
Let's take a look and see how we can use data and the insights drawn from that data to make effective business decisions in real time and the financial impact that can have on our organization. Let's say you've been experiencing turnover in the financial controller position within your organization and haven't had much success filling that role over the last several months. You may begin asking yourself, are we offering competitive enough pay to potential candidates? Or perhaps has the baseline salary for this position changed since the start of the pandemic? Or based on the work experience and tenure of the candidates we're interviewing, should we be offering a higher base salary to be more in line with our competitors and peers? To answer all of those questions, we'll be leveraging ADP's Annual Compensation Explorer, which shows salary information for nearly 10,000 unique job titles as of the most recent quarter end and can be filtered down by peer groups in your industry, revenue size, employee count, and geography. We'll begin by searching the database for the financial controller position, and you can always verify the job description to ensure it aligns with the roles and responsibilities you're looking for. For this example, we'll be using Nashville, which you can see highlighted in pink on the map. At a quick glance to the left, you can already see that the base salary and total compensation for this position in Nashville has increased by 0.04 and 0.7% respectively in the last year, whereas the same figures nationally have gone down. Just by looking at this data alone, you can begin to draw the conclusion that perhaps the compensation offered to candidates locally may need to be adjusted accordingly in order to attract top local talent. Without making anyone dizzy, as we scroll down this page, we can see additional compensation metrics for this role, including overtime, bonuses, and increases in salary based on tenure. Now, aside from making sure we're attracting new talent with competitive pay, another topic that's keeping executives up at night is whether or not they have pay equity across their organization. And to answer that question, we'll be looking at the Pay Equity Explorer. This dashboard allows us to identify how many employees across the organization have potential pay gaps, and more specifically, what the pay gap is between men and women or between race and ethnic groups. And I know we have quite a bit of finance folks on the call today, so I'm sure your first question in looking at this would be, what is it going to cost my organization to close those gaps and insulate us from any potential risk? And while that figure in this example is 1.8 million, the system also offers additional options at various cost points should you want to close that pay gap in a phased approach. And lastly, as it relates to equity in the workplace, over the past year, organizations have become much more aware and committed to ensuring that their workforce is comprised of diverse backgrounds and experiences. In fact, you may even be finding that when you're looking to bring on new clients, those prospective clients are interested in understanding and learning how diversity is represented in your organization and how it's adopted into the company culture. This diversity and inclusion dashboard allows you to quickly understand just how diverse your workforce is over any given time frame and in specific locations, departments, or organizational level, such as your leadership team. You can even hone in on specific areas that may need immediate attention, which you could see shaded here in blue. Now we're going to switch gears a bit from compensation and take a look at another variable that can substantially impact an organization's total labor costs, and that's overtime. Overtime may be the result of absenteeism, inaccurate scheduling, ineffective time policies, or very often simply just a lack of visibility into overtime as it's occurring. Two questions we find executives and supervisors asking themselves constantly is, what does their overtime look like today across each department or location? And is it increasing throughout the year? In this example, let's say in Q1 of 2020, we implemented an automated time and attendance system, which allowed us to see in real time which employees were approaching overtime and build weekly schedules accordingly. As a result, we can see over the past year, each quarter, our overtime across all 6 locations was reduced significantly, which is great. But now that we've improved our overtime spend internally, we still want to compare it to that of our peer group and see if there's any additional room for improvement. And here we can see that based on about 2,200 similar organizations, our overtime percentage of total hours is almost 3 points less than that of our peers. We can even drill down by quarter to see if any of our busy seasons have an impact on this benchmark, which we can quickly identify that in Q3, our busiest season, our overtime is close to that of our peer group, which is completely warranted. So now that we've got a great handle on how to pay people competitively and equally, and how to drive down any unnecessary labor costs such as overtime, we want to try and reduce one other metric that can be incredibly costly to our organization, which is employee turnover. Not only does turnover result in lost productivity and revenue associated with that job title, but it also requires an investment in recruiting and onboarding dollars to replace those valued lost employees. So the first thing we want to identify is what our turnover metric looks like and where turnover is occurring the most across departments. So as we take a look at the turnover dashboard, we can quickly identify that our turnover rate is 2.57, which is up about 1/3 of a percentage point from last quarter. However, if we take a look at our peer group, we can see that our organization's turnover is really just a fraction of similar groups in our industry, so we're certainly doing something right to retain our people. But again, for the finance folks on the call today, even at 2.57%, your first thought when looking at this data is probably, what is the financial impact on my cost of labor as a result of this turnover, and how can I prevent it from happening in the future as much as possible? Based on the number of lost employees in the past year, combined with the average cost of severance pay, recruiting, training, ramp-up time, this would be the approximate total cost in turnover resulting from lost employees in 2020, most of which came from the sales department. Conversely, by retaining all employees in the high-risk group, you can potentially prevent $1 million in future turnover costs. Let's take a look at how we might be able to do that. This is where we can begin to lean on the power of AI and predictive analytics to combine existing turnover factors with the trends of current employees to determine who is most impacted and likely to exit the organization within the next year. By using those factors and a set of algorithms, here are the high risk of turnover employees we may want to take immediate action with in hopes of retaining the talent we've invested so much in already. And we can do so by addressing the top turnover factors that have been identified from past resignations, which includes compensation, tenure, pay increases, and commute time or distance. We can also see how we stack rank in those respective categories among nearly 5,000 peer groups in the same industry.
Hopefully, you were able to see from those use cases just how impactful clean, real-time data delivered in the form of intuitive, easy-to-use dashboards can be when making executive business decisions. If we think back to some of the challenges we reviewed earlier today around availability, usefulness, relevance, and complexity of enabling workforce analytics, we can conclude that, one, not all data is created equally. We need to ensure that we're working with accurate, up-to-date data in order to draw valid and actionable insights. Two, consuming data can be very overwhelming. The more we can shape that data we have into meaningful stories and visuals, the quicker we can expect our teams to take action on them. 3, the data needs to be specific and personalized in order for those using it to effectively drive change in their respective areas. And 4, the tools you deploy to executives and managers within your workforce need to offer simplified sophistication. Systems and processes that have lengthy implementations can result in slow value realization. Technology used to access data must be simple and adaptable to the skills of each and every single person using it. In doing so, you can gain the result you expect in the timeframes you need. And that's all that I have for today. If you're interested in learning more about what you saw, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. But in the meantime, Steve, I'll pass it back to you to initiate Q&A.
Diana, thanks so much. Every time I see a new topic that big data can be used for, I'm blown away at how useful it is. I think it was super trendy for a while, and not everybody kind of understood how to harness these big data sets. But ADP's data set is just so big and rich that even smaller companies now can get a lot of insight that make a really material difference to the business. That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, obviously, with where we are in 2021 and everything we went through in 2020, one of the things that people are really interested in is how compensation and some of these other metrics that you went over have changed as a result of the pandemic. So are there any trends that ADP has seen in your data with regard to salary trends, over the last 12 months or so?
Sure. So I think, as it relates to compensation specific to roles or specific to industries, it really is just that. There's no blanket statement that we've been able to conclude around how compensation has been impacted, just because so many different industries and specific roles have been hit differently by the pandemic. But one thing that ADP's Research Institute has been able to conclude by looking at existing organizations and doing some surveying is that employees are willing to potentially do more work for less compensation or put in extra hours without being paid overtime if it means job security. So while organizations are, scrambling to potentially rehire and refill some open roles that they have, they should also know that the employees they have in place today really value their positions and understand how detrimental this pandemic was to their employers. And, they're willing to go the extra mile if it means keeping their job.
That's great. And from a benchmarking perspective, right? Because a lot of this is about being able to compare yourself to your peer groups. Can you talk a little bit about expand on that reduction in labor cost concept? You talked about it with the overtime benchmarking, which I think is really interesting. How else can this data set be used, or are you seeing clients use this data set to reduce their total labor costs?
Sure. So I think, turnover is definitely a big one. We did highlight it in the use cases, but I think companies are now bought in and on board with investing time, energy, resources, changing their culture in the way that they onboard people, recruit people. And it's just so critical to make sure that after all of that work is done, we're retaining the people that we've invested so much in getting into the organization. So really leveraging, machine learning and AI, which is really just so cool and completely disrupting the HR landscape as a whole, and making sure that we're using historical data of what's caused voluntary terminations paired with, some of the different metrics we looked at, like potentially commute to work, which may not apply necessarily today, but perhaps merit increases, tenure, how often we're doing performance reviews to make sure that we're insulating any of those high-risk employees from leaving the organization.
I think that's a good answer. I think a lot of getting your handle on turnover costs is really important, right? Turnover is pretty expensive for virtually any company. So I think that's also a good point to tease out there. Before I go to our next question, I just want to remind everybody you can use our Q&A window at the bottom of Zoom to submit any additional questions. For Diana, we do have time for one or two more. So Diana, when we talk about company sizes, I think probably most of the folks on the line right now and the folks who attend these C-suite snack sessions, they're middle market, right? They're kind of middle market, lower middle market, some small businesses. For smaller companies, and roughly speaking, maybe under 200 employees, 250 employees, how should they think of the practical ways that they can use benchmarking? How often should they be evaluating what their actuals versus benchmarks are? And is the data set that you presented to us, is it updated frequently enough to be able to accommodate that sort of cadence?
Sure, absolutely. So to answer the second part of the question, the benefit of the data and the dashboards that I shared today is that it's as close to real time as we can get compared to a lot of other benchmarking data that may be survey-based and potentially, months and months or years outdated. Our data is updated as of the most recent quarter. So in a lot of those dashboards I shared, you would see as of December 2020. So a lot of quarterly trends that may have emerged based on whatever is happening in the market, especially the last 4 quarters, would be reflected in those data sets. And I think, specializing and working so closely with executives of companies in that sweet spot, that mid-market of maybe 1 to 300 employees, I think those are the organizations that benefit so tremendously because they have enough of a workforce where a tweak here or there in their process can have a tremendous financial impact. And I think it would be fair to say that on a quarterly basis, organizations should be taking a look at not only their internal metrics, but also seeing how they're comparing to their peer groups. We find that on a quarterly basis, that's enough time for any changes or new approaches that have been implemented to start to play out and start to drive some business results.
That's great. It's great. Well, Diana, I want to thank you for joining us today. Terrific session. Really appreciate the insight. And I look forward to kind of continuing this discussion afterwards.
Thank you so much, Steve.
And thank you to ADP for making you and your data available for today's session as well. Could you just put your contact information up there real quickly on the slide before?
Absolutely.
So if there are any further questions about this data set, if you're an ADP client, which I know many of you are, and you want to understand how you can get access to this data and be able to do some of the analysis that Diana walked through, her contact information is on the screen. So please feel free to reach out and they'll connect you with the proper resources at ADP. Really good job, Diana. I encourage anybody with further questions to reach out. So thank you. All right, we can go to that last slide. So everybody, thanks very much for joining us today for another great session of C-Suite Snacks. If today was interesting to you, I want to point out a few other people-focused sessions that we've done. If you go to our C-Suite Snacks content hub on our website, you can view the slides and watch the replay of our state and local tax webinar, which was all focused on handling remote employees and what some of the talent ramifications and tax ramifications are of that. And then you can also watch last week's session with David Lewis, the CEO of Operations Inc., who gave us an overview of the considerations for when you're reopening your workplace after COVID. I would also direct you to April 15th, which is our next talent-focused webinar, which is going to be focused on trends in the benefits space with Cambridge, Sean Gagnon from Cambridge. So encourage you to check those out. If you are interested in cryptocurrency, we're going to kick off what's called a Master Snack session next Thursday at noon. So the way these are going to work is if you register for next Thursday's session, you'll receive invites for all 5 of our Master Snacks classes on cryptocurrency. All of the, from basic overview information to more technical analysis of using it, the taxability of it, accounting for it, all those sorts of things. So register for next week's session, April 1st. We'll be joined by Mark DeMichael from Citrin Cooperman to talk about, the basics. How are people making money in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, which will be followed up by a series of Wednesday sessions that dive deeper into that topic. And then on April 8th, we'll be joined by Mike Camacho, who leads our track practice, including cybersecurity, talking about how to prepare your company for hacking events and intrusion events. So join him to understand how you can minimize your risk. As we do every week, we will announce our snack basket winner today. That's going to be Chuck O'Donnell from Bradford Soapworks. Chuck, congratulations. Hope you enjoy your basket. Somebody from our team will be in touch to get shipping information for you. And once again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Sign up for our newsletter, register for our next sessions, and we look forward to seeing you on future C-Suite Snacks sessions here every Thursday at noon. So thanks again, and we'll